If you remember, we reported, as has been reported in Italian news agencies, the Pope, in a meeting with the Italian Bishops' Conference, told them there was too much word that if we use will probably get censored on YouTube, but it was as a pejorative way to refer to sodomites, and said they shouldn't be in seminaries. This kind of shocked many people, given his apparent support of this lifestyle with blessings and other things. And we tried to make a little sense of it. Whatever little sense we tried to make of it seems even more confusing with the follow up. Again, I think this great mystery of Pope Francis, of Jorge Bergoglio, I think is just confirmed by this. He is not a person of principle. That's the problem. If we want to find a principle of consistency and coherence, it's just not there. He just loves. I think it's something even greater than kind of a Hegelian dialect. It's like Hegelian matter antimatter explosions. He just likes to go from one extreme to the other, and sort of bring about this confusion. So just right after this gets reported about these comments, three specific things happen. One, a former seminarian writes to Pope Francis, and he's somebody who was put out of a seminary for having these tendencies towards this unnatural sin and vice. He describes himself as an aspiring gay seminarian, and he writes about how he was kicked out because of this, despite feeling a strong calling to the priesthood. His name is Lorenzo Michel Noe Caruso. He writes to Pope Francis by email on May 28th. Now, remember how long it takes to respond to the dubia cardinals. May 28th, this email gets sent. Right? Not a cardinal, a former seminarian. On June 1st, a handwritten letter, a picture of which is taken and then emailed back to this guy, arrives. So he writes to the Pope, gets an answer in 3 days. That tells you something, first of all. So, in this handwritten note that was scanned and sent by email, there's really some very bizarre replies. First, he denounces his favorite whipping boy, clericalism. Denounce clericalism, which is essentially a euphemism for Orthodox doctrine, priests that adhere to Orthodox doctrine. And he basically says, what you're talking about is clericalism, clericalism. He then says, quote, and this is a quote from an English translation, Jesus calls everyone. Some think of the church as a customs. I think he means like a customs office. Right? And this is bad. The church must be open to everyone. Brother, go ahead with your vocation. Uh, so obviously the church is open to everyone, but you have to do something to get in, right? So like a movie theater, let's put it this way, might be open to everyone. We're showing a movie, it's open to the public. But you can't just walk in and say, well, I'm not going to buy a ticket. They'll say, well, you can't get in. Well, I thought it was open to everyone. Well, it is, but you have to buy a ticket. So the church is open to everyone, but you have to buy your ticket to get in, which is essentially be baptized, or if you are baptized, repent of your mortal sins. And grave matter. There's no way getting around that homosexual acts are grave matter. Right? Yeah, whatever. I don't know this person. I don't know their state of their knowledge or will, but at least if they're talking about it, it appears that they have full consent of the will and full knowledge, to at least extent where it certainly it appears from externals to be a mortal sin. So the church is open to everyone, but this is how classic Pope Francis is. He says that, but doesn't explain what that actually means to be open to everyone. Jesus was there to forgive everyone's sin who sought forgiveness. He didn't just say, well, come and be as you are, come as you like, sin as you want. He says to the adulteress at his feet, go and sin no more. So Pope Francis doesn't say the church is open to everyone. Brother, go and sin no more. He says, go ahead with your vocation. Not now, again, this seems to be in direct, because it is contradiction with which he tells the Italian bishops, kick sodomites out of the seminary. Then one writes to him, go ahead, be a priest. Right. And again, according to the report of the Italian bishops, he said, even if they have the slightest tendency towards it, this guy, from his own admission, is beyond a slight tendency. And he's saying, go away. So it's what a lot of people say, will the real Pope Francis please stand up, right? Or bizarre conspiracy theories of two Pope Francises, which again, I don't think are true at all. He is clearly the same person. But this is how modernism and Peronism that we talked about last week work. You say one thing, you say something totally contradictory, but the principle of non-contradiction doesn't hold for modernists. So in principle of non-contradiction, something cannot be true, right, and not true in the same sense at the same time, right? So I can't be, take a timely example, a man and not a man at the same time, right? But for a modernist, you can be opposed to homosexuals in the seminary and in favor of it at the same time, and that's not a problem. Essentially, that is really, I mean, he's sort of a hyper modernist in this sense, that's exactly what he's doing. He's saying the direct opposite of what he said to the Italian bishops, to an Italian person who was presumably was in an Italian seminary, to get even more sort of point to it. So this is May 28th/June 1st. The same week, Father James Martin, sometime Jesuit, publishes a book. And this is a book we actually reported on before. It's been in the news that it was forthcoming, and about the miracle of the raising of Lazarus, which essentially the reports of the book, it's only out in Italian now, but the pre-publication discussion by James Martin himself is that it's about how the episode of Lazarus come out is an acceptance of gays coming out of the closet, essentially. That it's Christ accepting their sin, and Lazarus is dead. He's somebody who is sinful, and Christ just tells him to come out. Bizarre. But what's more bizarre, which was now revealed for the first time that this book is now published in Italian, is that the preface to the book is written by Pope Francis. Again, this is not speculation. Father James Martin is someone who encourages the homosexual lifestyle. He with glee blessed, according to his own words, couples right after the Fiducia Supplicans. So here's a little bit of what the preface says. Father James Martin, as a quote from an English translation that was put out by, who was this? Catholic News? No, by America Magazine. What? No surprise. Martin is an editor for America Magazine. Father James Martin, the author of many other books that I know and appreciate, deserves our gratitude for this new text devoted to what he calls Jesus's greatest miracle. So again, a overwhelming endorsement of a person who essentially dissents from Catholic teaching. There are many reasons to thank him, closely tied to the way Come Forth unfolds. It's always fascinating and never predictable, kind of like your pontificate, I guess, is never predictable. First and foremost, Father Martin makes the biblical text come alive. This is very modernist. It's all about vital energy, making everything alive, feeling. Again, religion is an inner experience. It's not about the intellect, it's about everything coming alive. He analyzes it with the eyes and erudition of a diverse set of writers who have probed this passage deeply, capturing many facets, emphases, and interpretations. But his reading is always, quote, loving, never detached, not nor coldly scientific. Again, it goes on and on with just pedantic praise for this man who undermines the basic tenets of natural law and divine law. Again, another sample, the fact that God, quote, speaks should give us a little jolt each and every day. Okay, this is the Pope who talks about the God of surprises. God doesn't give us a jolt, right? God is the confirmations of the divine law reinforce the natural law. God, although many things we couldn't know without God's revelation, what he does reveal is not bizarre, unfathomable in the sense of just inexplicable. It is reasonable. Even the Trinity, which we cannot completely explain, is something that our mind can accept, can understand. So even something as deep as the Trinity although the depths of it are will take an eternity, is something that our mind can actually come to some terms with. When it comes to the natural and the moral law, again, God tells us nothing that is not already accessible by uh, reason. He notes also the deep Jesuit tradition that this book comes out of the methods of the Jesuits, which have gotten us people like Father James Martin's. Um, and again, the whole premise, even as this preface points out, is essentially God accepts Lazarus despite his sins, even though there is no suggestion that Lazarus is a sinful person. He actually appears in the gospel to be a very devout Jew, not again like Mary Magdalene, but they're trying to turn it into God just accepting sin. So absolutely bizarre. And then, if that weren't enough, the week's capped off by 3 appointments to the Congregation for the Promotion of Homosexuality. Oh, excuse me. I mean, the Congregation for the Doctrine, or the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, run by the Kissing Cardinal. 3 appointments. Cardinal Jose Tolentino de Mendonça, prefect of the Dicastery for Culture and Education, who is basically the rector of a private chapel that, quote, in Lisbon, known for, quote, ministering to homosexuals whom he said he doesn't judge. And our Lord says to judge the sin. He's also been a supporter of Maria Teresa Forcades y Villa, who is a former religious sister famous for advocating for, quote, queer theology. Appointment 2, Cardinal Marcello Samararo, who was from the Dicastery of the Causes of the Saints, reportedly turned his diocese in the Italian capital of the Catholic gay movement, hosting forums of Italian LGBT Christians and groups seeking to make homosexuality acceptable. Finally, Archbishop Bruno Forti, another Italian bishop who was responsible for the sections on homosexuality in the radically controversial interim document of the First Synod on the Family in 2014 that we reported on here at Catholic Family News. So essentially, you judge people by their actions. Actions speak louder than words. This Pope's words are contradictory, but these 3 actions, along with endorsing Father James Martin's book, clearly tell us he's in favor of promoting the gay agenda, even if he wants to shock the Italian bishops with these bizarre comments.
Yeah, goodness gracious. It's just such calamity, really. We just have nonsense. There's not a whole lot one can make of this because we saw last week the so-called Pope splainers, as they like to say, they said this vindicates us. Finally, it shows Pope Francis's true colors. He's been on our team all along. He's this right winger, this closeted right winger. He's gonna he's the real deal when it comes to promoting Orthodox doctrine. It doesn't even take a week for all this stuff to come out. And really, Brian mentioned the problem with the Jesuits. The Jesuit response directly following that comment, it's just a comment to the Italian Bishops' Conference. They went insane. I'll give a few examples, just so we can understand how deeply rooted this problem really is. So, of course, our favorite Father James Martin said on X, shortly after that comment made to the Italian bishops, he said, "In my 25 years as a priest and almost 40 as a Jesuit, I've known hundreds of holy, faithful, and celibate gay priests. They've been my superiors, my teachers, my confessors, my mentors, my spiritual directors, and my friends." Think about that. To our audience, how many priests have you known or even seen in your entire life? Father Martin says he has known at least 200. He says hundreds of gay priests. That means they would have had to have told Father Martin, "I'm a homosexual." They would have had to have said. That's bizarre. To think of how widespread that problem is. That's quite simply crazy. And for Father Martin to be taking issue with something very simple, which is that people with that tendency shouldn't be leaders of the faithful, especially in as we keep in mind the sex abuse controversy with the priestly scandals, all of that's adds to that. Now there was another Jesuit, a prominent Jesuit on Twitter, Jos Moons on he's a Jesuit on Twitter. He said, "Let's face reality and let's be thankful. There are many gay seminarians, priests, and bishops. My estimation, at least half in the Vatican and in your parish." He said, he goes on to say, which this is bizarre. He says Pope Benedict was probably gay, and same for John Henry Newman or Gerard Manley Hopkins. Crazy man. The Jesuits are out
That's
of
crazy.
control.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been out of control for a long time. And I mean, this is the sort of moral laxity that led, we've talked about this on this show before. This is the moral laxity that led to the Jansenist controversy, led to the criticism of the Jesuits in the first place. And here we have a Jesuit pope followed by his army of Jesuit priests backing him up in supporting the LGBTQ agenda here in this Pride Month, which should be dedicated to the Sacred Heart, something radically against the vice of sodomy and homosexual acts like this. So not a good look for Pope Francis. This is going to cause a lot of people to look very poorly upon the Catholic Church, souls that would have been good potentials to convert to the faith, seeing the orthodoxy of the Catholic faith. All of that has been undermined now by this faithless agenda. So terrible week for Pope Francis here.
Absolutely. And really that quote you read, it's an utter slander and defamation of John Henry Cardinal Newman, St. John Newman, and Pope Benedict himself to just try to make those outlandish claims.